Okay, Ellen, can you hear me? I am, and I'm in the room, and you should be able to hear me through the Zoom. We are unmuted, so you should be able to hear at least me talking. There might be other noises.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted.
Okay.
Unknown caller.
Hi, Alex. Yeah,
Okay. Now that we're not on that same phone, let me go back in there.
Yeah. Oh, no.
We hear you out.
Figure out if that machine speaks quarter.
Hang on, just a sec. We were able to hear you. You wanna say something?
well, yes. Can you still hear me?
Yep, we can hear you in here.
Okay,
I can hear myself, so go ahead and mute yourself now.
Dude, I already set it up.
I knew you already did.
Hear me?
Testing,
Ellen?
testing.
No.
I don't know.
Okay,
I talked to Beatrice and we're.
I think you're
just
good to
one
go.
of the
But also have
people
an issue.
to take off to.
Yeah,
George,
me too.
Because the meeting of the 18th, we're gonna try to have a report.
So it's set up here, so maybe we need to
So
set up.
between now and the end of
There it
next
is.
week. I
Now it's picked up.
don't know if it works.
I
I don't know, it's
I
not.
saw that. No.
Oh,
In fact,
we have
what I
to
may
change
this do is while I have
Has
this
to be
stuff
set
Yeah.
to this,
after our meeting, whatever, let's find
that
that.
Muted,
And then
has to be muted.
and then.
chasing us
And
around.
then we can
Great.
switch it.
I'll have to look. Yeah, once we decide. we'll
But
figure
then
it out.
that's still not picking up the
Last
USB.
week.
No.
Yeah.
I know the 17th when I get my surgery, so the 18th, I may be.
So do me a favor and can you jump onto Mixler real quick?
Hopefully I can be on.
But if we were on real
Okay.
chat, we could put it on. real
Okay.
chat.
But I'm
forgot
pretty
it's
sure you can hear Alan.
It'll
be fine.
Yeah.
I know it's scary, but. Because the real tech is physically
It's
in
not
the
scary.
building.
I've had enough surgeries.
Doesn't
that I-
doesn't scare me.
But
So
I
Monday,
just spoke to
It's supposed to be
Friday.
this.
Oh my gosh,
On
Sure
Mr. Allen,
Brian or
Brian,
Allen.
he just had his done 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And he was at our meeting Friday,
It's on the right
was on
one.
his cane, so I said,
Okay,
It's not
At
picking
least
it
I
up.
got a little motivation there.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good.
Maybe it isn't any. And
So he just had his, yeah, I knew he was having a second, and this is the second. one.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
So he hobbled on in. I thought, I could do
Come
that.
on,
Yeah,
come on.
yeah. Good.
Hello, hello.
It's not liking you
Anything
today.
else going on? Robin?
just, you know, first couple days back, you're bombarded with everything.
You know.
You walk into your office and stuff and you do this and we're, and just,
I know.
it's, I got it all done. I've been caught up in
This
the,
one.
the guy calls and says, hey, I have your car. Don't deliver it
And it's
now.
not
It's
picking
in a
it up
snowstorm.
now.
He says, well, somewhere I am.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're in Phoenix. Don't deliver it.
You can see here.
I gotta go read Becky to pick you my phone.
Oh, okay.
We're meeting.
Okay.
So,
I don't know what to do.
is weather that bad?
This has been an intermittent ongoing issue.
I'm just rounding Vegas.
If we set it to micro and a real text speakers.
Call you from,
So here,
Cedar
I'm gonna
City.
set it to
You
this.
call me from Cedar City and tell me whether you're delivering that car today or
Tell
not.
me.
Right.
He hasn't called.
He hasn't called.
So tomorrow would be better.
Yeah.
Ellen, can
Oh,
you try
I didn't
speaking
even
and see if we
spot.
can hear you unmute and speak?
Sorry.
I'd be cheap, I just don't know.
You don't want that job ready. This is how you'll look.
Yeah, more-
I'm only 29 years old.
So how many more cars are in your name now?
I have it here.
4, 5,
Just one, and I got it right down to,
And it's the S class, the 550?
it's the 550, yeah, and with the AMG package.
Yeah.
So
And it's my color?
it's that silver, it's a
darker
pretty
green.
silver, yeah.
The issue with that.
Wow.
Did you see a picture?
You sent me, I could only see the front, so I didn't see.
Kyrie,
the
are you
so it
in?
wasn't
Are
great.
you in?
I'm just gonna run my presentation from this computer, so.
Not
You put it somewhere warm, Alan, or somewhere.
It's
You got room for it in your house?
well, kind of, because I have the RV pad, I can store it there, but I, we have the condo.
So we gonna
holiday,
join
put it in there.
Scott?
We are
There, for and I don't need it, it was just fun.
Ellen, if you can hear me, can you unmute and just talk so we can see if we can hear you through Mixlr?
I can almost not hear you at all. It's so light. It's, yeah, I really can just barely hear anything.
Try and see if you can turn your volume up because I'm like yelling. into
I've turned
the
it
mic.
up several times. It's up at its absolute max.
Oh.
You have to share.
That's okay.
Can we do that?
Good with that.
You know what? You got that card from $1,000 cheaper than I did. It took me 3 days to
And I
come
can
back.
yell at
First
you
it's
or
coming
change
back.
it or something like that.
So I guess I'll quit calling.
Oh, I don't see it.
Just call, text me saying he's.
I know.
Okay.
Check that now.
No, I used to know there was gonna be a chance of going to the trade. Before I closed it.
I get started and immediately stop itself.
On my card and I'm like,
But I used to
first
be
of all,
nervous, but I should
City,
say,
and there's receipts that have for
yeah, I like.
the city.
Was.
Okay.
You.
On my, were you able to hear that too? Mike, I can hear now with proper volume.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and mute myself.
Okay, we might need you to test with us for just a second.
Okay, we are good. Thank you.
We have a brother now. We're fingers.
We are good.
We're good now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. This is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session for Tuesday, April 4th, 2023. Don't look outside. It doesn't look like April 4th, right?
Correct.
I'm not sure we live in Cottonwood Heights anymore. Anyway, first item of business on our agenda is actually a review of our business meeting agenda. Let me do that real quickly. We do have an acknowledgement tonight that I'll go over, and that is in 2020, the city council here passed a proclamation designating April as Child Abuse Prevention Month. That does not need to be renewed. It renews every year, but we do recognize it, and I'll probably even read a portion of the proclamation. And I think it's something that all of us are happy to continue to support and also make it known that our city supports child abuse prevention. So we'll have a citizen comment period. Our action items for tonight is just one, and it's consideration of ordinance 395 amending Title 17 Cottonwood Heights Code of Ordinances concerning stormwater management. We actually are going to discuss this in the staff report, so we won't discuss it now. We'll come back to it. And then our consent calendar, which is our retreat minutes, and then our March 21st meetings. So we are excited for item number 3, which is we have with us here our Y2 Analytics president of Kyrene Gibb, partner and vice president of research, I should say is your correct title. We've had commissioned another survey that went out to our residents. We had a lot of people participate, and we're excited to go through the results as a council today. So Kyrene, if you want, actually before I hand it to you, I'm going to have it just Tim briefly.
Yeah. So we appreciate Kyrene and the work on this, and she's going to go through the information. I sent you the full top line survey earlier or last week, and so you have that. And then I also sent you the summary that she's going to present tonight. But appreciate this, and hopefully it can help us in our general plan process as well. So.
Well, we're excited to go through things here. I do think I can get a little bit more full screen, maybe not. Okay, that's fine. So we're excited to go through the results of this survey. Thank you, Mayor, for the temporary promotion there as well. I like it. So starting off with full screen mode. There we are. This one, the bottom. Yeah, there it is. Okay, thank you. So starting off with a few key takeaways here. This is
Kyrene, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? I failed to mention that we have our council member Ellen Burrell is online with us. Correct? Hi, Ellen, you there?
She was.
Yes, I am.
Okay, she's there.
No.
And for now, we're going to excuse our council member, District 1, Doug Peterson. So I just wanted to make that clear before we start. So go ahead.
of course, yeah. Okay, so jumping in here, these are sort of the condensed high level findings that we pulled out from this data. I will say that housing and development and growth is the stickiest topic in public opinion throughout the state right now. So there's a lot to digest here. Not all of it perfectly consistent, but I do think there are some helpful trends that emerge and preferences that residents are expressing fairly clearly. Other parts are about as clear as mud. So we'll try to make sense of it. First and foremost, I think it's worth noting that residents give above average ratings for trails and open spaces and commercial business options in the city. So when we're thinking about the overall environment where residents live, work, and play, there's a lot to enjoy in Cottonwood Heights. We do have about a third of residents who say that walkability, public transit, and affordable housing in the city are aspects or areas where the city could improve. Probably not news to anyone here.
Have you asked similar questions to that in other cities?
Not quite this way. No, this is a little bit more of a pointed question that we developed for this survey in particular. But If we have benchmarks going forward, I'm happy to contextualize.
Okay.
When we ask residents specifically about what type of housing they would like to see more of or more affordable options for in the city, residents are most enthusiastic about seeing an increase in traditional single-family housing on its own lot, followed by condensed lot, single-family housing and townhomes. Again, probably no big surprise there. We're talking about more of what we have in Cottonwood Heights, and that's the most appealing thing to residents. The least appealing potential options largely are condominiums and apartment buildings. So when we talk about options that immediately evoke higher density and higher buildings or taller buildings, those things get the most initial pushback from residents. When we ask specifically about a potential new multifamily housing development, so something that would bring a little bit more density, residents are most interested in seeing something like this close to the commercial areas and sort of major thoroughfares, transit access, and keeping it away from the canyons. So definitely a lot of emphasis on preserving that mountain view shed throughout the community, and sort of preserving the spirit or the feel of the existing single family neighborhoods throughout the city. And there is a sense that that would help to reduce or to limit the potential for increased congestion and traffic through neighborhoods that would come with some of that increased density. There's also a concern that is echoed throughout the survey at various points about potential impacts on residents' property values if we're talking about increasing density in various parts of the city. So a lot of interest in some more commercial centers, sort of denser urban developments if we're thinking about how to incorporate more of that multifamily style housing. That said, when we're talking about development and growth in general, or increasing housing broadly, the things that residents sort of gravitate towards are mixed use in the sense that they would like to see recreational amenities accompanying the housing that's built.
So what do you mean when you say that, recreational amenities? I mean, what is that?
So
'Cause-
parks, trails, those are the things that when we talk about, we framed it as, you know, what types of uses or land development would come along with that housing. And the thing that residents were most interested in was sort of the recreational amenities in addition to the housing. So if it's a development with a park or developments that are connected with trails, shared green space, things like that are going to be more appealing than a true mixed use development that includes some commercial element.
You know, if I may also interject a clarifying question. In number 3, there was the distinct, you have here as a key element that the developments would be close to commercial areas and away from the canyons. And so isn't that, I think that's interesting for the council in lieu of the fact that we have an urban core planned for as close as you can get to the canyons, which is the conversion of the gravel pit to a very dense urban development there with housing.
And I'll reread it. I didn't quite get as much away from the canyons as I kind of got away from the single family housing, but I will reread that and with this view, because it is good to get a different perspective on it. Now, what was we were just talking, mixed use. Okay, was there anything in the mixed use definition? Because what I'm hearing you say is their mixed use choice was public residential, but not commercial.
Yes.
Okay.
Residential
And
with recreational access. to the
Distinction that I don't
public.
think we think about in planning, but
And so that wasn't.
and I guess what the distinction was, when you say recreational, would that include a theater or a skating, that type of,
Yeah, that's kind of what went into my head for a second.
yeah, so
That's fair. We didn't explicitly define recreational uses, so that's something that I think would have to be vetted on a more microscopic level. We're looking for broad themes here. So more public access to recreational amenities generally is the type of category that residents would like to see incorporated into potential developments. And they would like to see those developments sort of dispersed throughout the city, counter to their preferences specifically about multifamily housing. So if we're thinking about single family detached housing, but with shared green space, with shared recreational amenities, things like that are perceived to add value to the existing neighborhoods. And dispersing those things throughout existing neighborhoods is actually more appealing than having those new developments being placed next to commercial areas or undeveloped areas of the city. We'll get into a little bit more of residents' preferences, specifically about where developments make sense and the trade-offs that they considered that informed this particular takeaway, but those are some of the overarching themes. And then finally on this slide, and then we'll get into more of the meat of things, the two areas where we saw the most consensus from residents were interest in the development of small, walkable neighborhood commercial centers. So things that can sort of increase the community feel, increase the access residents have to the amenities that they're looking for on a daily or regular basis. And having those areas increase the overall walkability of Cottonwood Heights. So there is an interest, again, in increasing the pedestrian friendliness of the city through some of these potential small urban centers.
Which I might say. Oh, well, off on statement.
well, and I have a comment about those smaller commercial areas that I was gonna ask Mike. So maybe when we get done, you can come back to that.
Okay. This is just a quick look at our survey methodology. We were in the field for quite a while with this one, but in total, we ended up with a pretty good response rate here. 782 residents responded to the survey. Again, as usual, this has been weighted in regards to age, race, gender, home ownership, and so we are reflective of the overall city population. Residents were contacted via postcard, email, and text message to participate in this survey. We had a minor server outage the weekend that postcards began to be delivered, naturally, because nothing can go according to plan. But that outage was resolved and we were able to respond to all of the residents who reached out both to the city directly and to us through our helpline, notifying us of the issue and make sure that they had corrected access or reconnected access. So a minor blip at the beginning of our fielding period there, but overall, not a bad show. With a response of 782 residents, we have a margin of error of just over 4 percentage points around all of the estimates of the population as a whole. Among our individual district breakouts, we're looking at closer to 7 or 8 percentage points margin of error.
Can I just because it's been a long time since I had my statistics. If we're comparing two statistics, does that mean they need to be 4.2 or greater to start showing a difference, or between the two, it's 8.4?
A difference of more than 4.2 percentage points would be statistically significant if you're comparing two numbers. If we're looking at subgroups, so for example, if you're comparing District 1 and District 2, then it's a larger margin of error, but
I like it a lot and I like it a little bit. That's 4.2.
that's, yep, 4
Okay.
percentage point difference would
Sorry.
be statistically significant.
Refresh
Nope, great
my
clarification.
Skills.
And then just a quick look at some of the attitudes residents expressed in our last survey, specifically about housing and development in the city, because these questions and these responses helped inform the direction we took in this survey. So overall, the things that residents really latched onto in terms of the most important issues facing the city were focused on managing growing pains. So traffic, managing growth generally, housing density, and then water conservation relatedly. So That might shift a little bit now that we're all a little varied, but important concerns when we're thinking about land use and future development, certainly. We had just over half of residents, 58%, who said that the city was growing and developing in a positive way. But we did have some significant dissent about the availability and affordability of housing in the city. When we asked residents what types of features were most needed in the city, there was a lot of interest in small commercial centers, mixed use developments, and then of course, more single family housing. So again, more of what residents are used to in the city, preserving the skyline and neighborhood views, having a place for their children and family to live in the community, making communities more walkable, and providing affordable housing were the top 4 priorities residents identified overall when we're thinking about the potential and planning for the future in Cottonwood Heights. So
I have to be honest, I was a little surprised that wasn't the happy with the affordability option. Was 48% disagree with that, but I honestly thought that would be a lot higher. So that means that 52% don't think that it's.
No.
And I think a lot of that, sorry, Ellen, let me just clarify really quickly and then I'll address your question. But I think a lot of that comes from the fact that about a third of our residents have already paid off their housing. They're not paying rent or
I found
mortgage
that
anymore.
Really interesting.
30%.
30% people have paid off.
And I know the younger generation of the ones who all said it was at a higher percentage. That it was,
Yeah, significantly more likely to disagree with being satisfied with the affordability of housing. Ellen, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Hey, I just, since the mayor used 52% when he referred to being, I am happy with affordability, that actually, if I may make a correction there, the central number on that overall, I'm happy with affordability of housing in Cottonwood Heights, that central area is that they neither agree nor disagree. So only 26% of people in Cottonwood Heights believe that they are somewhat happy or happy, and 48% are unhappy.
That's why I framed it how I did. I said 48% disagree, and 52% don't think otherwise. That's or they would have chosen someone disagree or disagree. So
well, 26% said that they are happy or somewhat happy, and 48% said they are not happy with the affordability, because the 26% are people who have apparently not thought about it because they neither agree nor disagree, right? So I think that's pretty darn important that only 26% are happy, and yet they, we all say we want single family, and yet only 26% believe we have enough affordable housing.
Okay, so I want to move on because we have limited time and this is just context from the last survey. So let's get into the meat of things for this
I
round.
appreciate you bringing that up from the last one. That was.
Yeah, want to refresh memories just a bit. So looking at residents' overall evaluations of various aspects of the city, again, highly satisfied with trails and open spaces and the commercial business options throughout the city. Moderately satisfied, we have 43% who give above average ratings to the activities and entertainment options in the city. But the areas where we really start to see a shift to average or below average ratings are the walkability and pedestrian friendliness of the city, the public transportation options, and the affordable housing options that we have in Cottonwood Heights, with 80% of residents offering an average or needs improvement rating for the affordable housing options in the city. This is relatively consistent across districts. There are a few interesting differences to call out here. The one that I want to focus on the most is that residents in District 4 are the least likely to offer excellent or good or above average ratings for the walkability or pedestrian friendliness of the city. So there's definitely a sense that residents in District 4 would like to see an increase in the walkability of their neighborhoods in particular. And then public transportation options. District 1 residents are the most satisfied overall, most likely to offer excellent or good ratings.
That's because they have it all.
Exactly. Because when we think about where that
Exactly.
transit access is, where those points are, it's largely in District 1. So
The District 2 is the most moderate.
it would appear so.
Oh, God.
Closely by three.
When we ask residents about their specific housing payments per month, whether they are renters or owners, we're looking at a fairly normal distribution here with the most frequently cited monthly housing cost somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 a month. But again, 31% of our owners and 24% of our non-owners aren't paying for housing costs each month. So we have 1 in 4 folks who are living with parents or otherwise rent-free, and 30% of our homeowners who have already paid off their mortgage don't have a monthly housing cost. And I think that's a strong driver of these very, very consistent bell curves. It is rare that you see a distribution quite as normal as residents guess as to what a starter single family home might cost in the city.
You don't see this with other.
That's fascinating.
You tend to see gravitation toward the middle of a scale when residents are sort of shooting in the dark a bit.
Right.
And so this very normal distribution would suggest that residents maybe don't have much of a benchmark.
Okay.
The numbers, I think, you know, when we're talking about estimations, especially among those who either own their home and haven't paid for housing costs in a while, or those who are renting and maybe are a little bit concerned about what it would cost to own a single family home or a starter townhouse, we see some of those responses on the ends of the spectrum, but there's a lot of gravitation to the midpoints of these scales. And that, statistically speaking, would suggest that residents are guessing a little bit.
Enough far that it's kind of pushing it.
Yeah. Overall, we asked residents how available they thought various types of housing were in the city. Interestingly enough, 74% of residents think that apartments are very or somewhat available in Cottonwood Heights.
The
59,
perception, there's plenty.
yes, and 59% of residents think that single-family homes with large yards are very or somewhat available in the city.
Surprising that apartments is a higher.
Yeah, that one topping the list was fascinating to me. And again, I think there is just this overwhelming perception that all of the development, all of the growth is high density and that we're putting apartments everywhere and it's changing our quality of life. And I think that perception drives a lot of the concerns, even if that's far from accurate. Interestingly, some of what has been termed the missing middle style housing, the townhomes with individual yards or the detached single family homes that share a common lot with open space. Those are the options that residents are most likely to say are not very or not at all available in the city. So there is a little bit of a matchup here that some of these mid-density or higher density, but still detached single family options are the things that we could provide more of. Also fairly consistent patterns across district. It's worth noting that residents in District 1 are most likely to say that apartments are very or somewhat available. District 4 residents have a slightly lower likelihood of reporting that apartments are very or somewhat available, but still we're looking at high proportions of residents across all 4 council districts that believe that there's a lot of apartment stock to go around. So looking at residents' priorities for potential housing to be built in the city, we have just shy of half of residents who are interested in seeing more single-family housing, 20% who are interested in seeing condensed lot single-family housing, 17% who would like to see more townhomes, And then just over 10% who would be interested in condos, just shy of 10% who would be interested in seeing additional apartments.
Those were all parts of 100.
Sorry.
Yes, yeah, this is if they had to allocate 100%.
Oh,
This is our average allocation, so the residents' ideal mix. Also quite similar across council districts. When we ask specifically about potential multifamily housing, so attached housing like townhomes or twin homes, or apartments or condos, this heat map reflects the areas where residents would be most interested in seeing those types of developments. And we pulled out some of the thematic open-ended responses in this regard as well. So near transit corridors, near existing shopping and commercial centers, near where there are freeway and business access, keeping congestion away from the canyons and existing neighborhoods are some of the high level priorities that residents identify.
Well, I don't know how familiar you are with where these hotspots actually are, but it's apartments, commercial, kind of be determined, but some commercial, more apartments, a gravel pit. And it's the hotspots are the same hotspots we have.
Yeah. I do think it's worth noting that, yeah, the gravel pit shows up here. This is an area where residents are interested in seeing or open to seeing more density or more multifamily housing.
Guess that could be Pinnacle.
Yeah.
So I mentioned or alluded earlier on to some of the clear as mud findings here. We have 3 trade-offs that we presented to residents that are basically coin tosses. So when we asked residents whether they would like to see more emphasis on multifamily and other affordable housing options with convenient access to transit routes, or have the city maintain the current emphasis or the existing land use emphasis on commercial and retail space along significant transit corridors, we're looking at almost a 50-50 shot here if we're taking the margin of error into consideration. So 44% and 56%, we do have a statistically significant leaning toward maintaining the existing land use emphasis, but it's not a strong leaning. It's not a decisive conclusion.
On this one, your stretch could be the 2.5 points up and 2.5 points down, making it kind of a 46 to 54.
4.2 points up or down. So more like
On both of them?
Yes, so it could be a 48 to a 52, right?
Okay.
So
all right.
that's our flex there.
The demographics for that question, I can probably assume. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can.
I don't.
When we ask about whether residents would prefer to see more high density housing developments with opportunities for younger generations and future residents to live in the city, or maintain the current housing stock and limit those future opportunities, we see again a leaning, not a decisive opinion, but a leaning towards maintaining the current housing stock, keeping what we have and what we know in the city. When we ask whether residents would prefer to see a broader mix of housing types with more opportunities for residents of different socioeconomic backgrounds, or maintain the current housing stock, limiting those opportunities, we see an even closer to a coin toss. We're almost at a 50-50 split there, with a slight leaning towards maintaining the current housing stock again. The areas where we do have consensus, where residents seem to largely agree that there's room for change or improvement, planning for the development of small neighborhood commercial centers in future zoning to promote walkability is significantly more popular by almost a 2-to-1 ratio than maintaining larger contiguous residential only zoning that requires greater traveling distance to amenities. So walkability being a high priority is a theme that we see throughout the survey. And then whether residents would prefer to see more high density housing that is multiple stories high, concentrated in high traffic areas of the city, or more townhomes, condos, and multi-unit lots with restricted building height, preserving views and spreading those throughout the city. Preserving the views and dispersing those developments throughout the city is at a rate of 3-to-1 more popular than building vertically, even if those vertical developments are consolidated around existing commercial areas.
But on the fourth one about the smaller commercial centers. And this is what I was gonna bring up with possibly, I would be interested to see how that, if we actually got a bubble diagram on the city where we have small walkable areas drawn out on the city, and then found out where some of the, I assume there'd be some gaps. And finding out and showing people that map to find out, you know, if that's really a 2-to-1 desire, then, you know, which neighborhoods would kind of need to have some rezoning to take that place. I would be really interested to see that, because
Yeah, that's a really good point, Scott.
it's a very,
And
it's
I
a little
think
disconnected.
Hillside's a perfect example.
Yeah, that's good for if it's, I don't know, if it's a 10-minute walk or 15-minute walk, whatever it is, but it only goes out so
No,
far.
I know, no,
I don't think we certainly don't have coverage in the city for that type of a thing, so. But yeah, that was interesting to see.
I'm going to move quickly onto our conjoint results here just for the last couple minutes. So we designed a conjoint experiment to basically present residents with 2 options for complete housing developments, describing what types of land use would be incorporated into those developments, the types of housing that they would see, where it would be built, whether it would be owner or renter occupied, as well as sort of the proximity or walkability for transit and parks, schools, recreation, et cetera. So all of these different aspects of a development had various categories. They're described here in full detail, but in the actual presentation to residents, what they saw were 2 options that they were asked to choose between.
And
So-
a good chunk wanted none of the above.
We didn't offer them a none of the
No,
above
that's
option, which is the point, right? We're asking residents, even if neither of these sounds good to them, which one would they prefer if they had to choose? So presenting, again, 2 complete options and asking them to pick the one that's the most preferable overall. First, we see that at a high level, the categories that drive decisions the most are the land use for mixed use elements. So again, bringing in some of those recreational and publicly accessible amenities with the development, and the location of the development. So just looking at the individual attributes within each of these aspects or categories. The most popular potential development or location would be built inside an existing neighborhood with lower density. And I think there's just a gravitation towards lower density here. We used the density word, which is dangerous in the public sphere right now, but that gravitation towards lower density is very pronounced here. That was the one location option that residents found most appealing overall. The other option was so again, the other category that really drove preferences was the mixed use or the land use elements, whether it contained only housing, a mix of businesses and housing, a mix of housing and recreation, or a mix of housing, businesses, and recreation. And the most popular overall was containing a mix of housing and recreational amenities. So again, dispersed throughout existing neighborhoods, providing those publicly accessible recreational amenities, but keeping the overall density relatively low. Those were the 2 most important deciding factors. You can see some of the other things that had positive impacts on the selection of one of 2 options. Townhomes and luxury apartments were the relatively more dense options that residents gravitated toward. And those were the 2 options that had the most significant impact on a package being chosen in terms of the type of housing. Single family homes was more limited here. So I think there's some acknowledgement that when we're talking about a development, a full community, and placing it in somewhere existing in the city, there's not a lot of room for single family homes with large detached yards. And you see that showing up in the yard type at the bottom of the chart here as well. Individual yards that are fully fenced were the least appealing potential option there, whereas multi-unit lots with shared common space were significantly more appealing and had a positive impact on residents finding that particular option palatable or preferable. That is the crux of the survey. The appendix here is just the demographics of the sample overall, but I'm a little over time already, but if you have initial questions, I'm happy to address them.
Is this the 1 or -1, is that kind of a correlation type number?
Yes, so this is the preference share is what it's called. So if that appears in a package that has a 62 or a 0.62% chance of increasing the appeal of that package. So all of these together would, the plus or minus 1 gives us a likelihood score of that particular option being chosen. I think this particular visualization is a little bit more helpful overall in terms of what things really drive residents' preferences. So again, coming down to the land use or whether it is mixed use or not, and then where it's placed in the city. And then everything else sort of has middling effects on the overall choice. So when we're thinking about a complete package that's presented to residents, the way we talk about the developments or the opportunities for development matters. And the access that residents have, existing residents and future residents have to amenities, to recreational space, to things that overall are correlated with positive quality of life in Cottonwood Heights, really do make a difference in whether that potential development is appealing to residents or not. So a lot to digest, I know. If you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to respond later, and Tim can funnel those my way.
Email this to us, or was this?
Yeah, it's in the packet.
That was in the packet.
But I will email it to you separately because there was a couple of updates, Irene, that you made. What's that?
I was just looking at the print, it says Murray up there, but it's Washington says Cottonwood Heights.
Oh, okay.
So I just copy.
Yeah, I just got the ones off of the.
Yeah,
first
we
one.
corrected that.
Okay.
It just didn't make it into the packet.
Well, Kyrene,
Just making
thank
sure
you.
where I'm
So
at.
appreciate that. This will be some good information for us to delve into further and help us in determining how we want our city to look and change. So thank you, appreciate it.
Of course, my pleasure.
Thanks. Item 4 on our agenda today is the Big Cottonwood Canyon map, the mobility action plan. And the reason that's on here, so most of you know Cottonwood Heights belongs to the Central Wasatch Commission. I'm a board member along with Sandy, Mill Creek, Holiday, or not Holiday, Mill Creek, some other cities, Salt Lake. And we commissioned a study to help us try to understand some of the things that we can do better to mitigate traffic in Big Cottonwood Canyon. So we had a study done. Blake Perez, who's the executive director for the Central Wasatch Commission, is on the line with us. And so we had our first presentation from that group that we commissioned, AECOM, I think is their name, and they have come up with some cool ideas. And so we're going to have Blake run through this presentation with us. But so first off, we want to say thank you, Blake, for being here. You're online and we appreciate you. I know you've come to a couple of our meetings, and I'll let you take over and drive this presentation. So.
Right on. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Council, for inviting me today and give a brief presentation. Do you want me to just share my screen for the slides?
Is that the easiest? Yes, that'll work great. Yep.
Yeah, I could do that. I sent over yesterday to Tim the presentation that I'm going through. Just to let you know, this presentation was from AECOM to the CWC Transportation Committee, which Mayor Wickers is a part of. This presentation was given about 2 weeks ago. It's pretty up to date as far as we're concerned. This presentation quickly covers the Big Cottonwood Canyon Mobility Action Plan draft report, which you can find on our website. So I'm giving you high-level information, you can go to our website and see the draft report in all of its 70 something pages, which give you a little bit more detail. And I'm going to try and go through this quickly so we can have a little bit more time at the end here. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me see. Let me try and get out of this real quick. Sorry, that didn't really come in the way that I wanted it to. Why can't this move? There we go. Okay. All right. Everybody can see that okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Cool. So this was presented to the Transportation Committee back on March 22nd. This is the agenda that we went through, a project update. So I'll go over quickly where we were, where we are, and where we're going to end up. I've got some recommendations, previews as well, and our next steps. I want to, before we go into this any deeper, the intention, Mayor Wickers hit it right on the head about what we were trying to do. This is a menu of options. This mobility action plan, this map, is going to give us a menu of options that we could further pursue. This isn't meant to be the solution, like what's going on in the canyon next to us, but a suite, a menu of options for us to pursue. So here's our timeline. We started this back in October of 22. Through the end of the fall and into the winter, we did mobility network analysis. We looked at mobility hub assessments, data collection. We were reviewing plans, defining our visions and goals. Then we pivoted into some more defined mobility hub recommendations and public survey. Wrap that up into March and then, February. And then at the end of last month, March, we released our draft Big Cottonwood Canyon Mobility Action Plan. So in the next 6 weeks, we will be revising that and updating, scrubbing numbers, getting some feedback, any questions, is finalizing that information. And then the final BCC map will be presented to the Transportation Committee and to the full Central Wasatch Committee, or excuse me, Central Wasatch Commission at the May meeting, at the beginning of May. So defining what are the problems we are addressing, we want to be really clear about what are the problems. You can see here seasonal peak period and year-round mobility issues in Big Cottonwood Canyon, with a focus of shifting car trips to transit and reducing single occupancy vehicles. These are some of the problems we are addressing. Lack of convenient, frequently reliable transit connecting and serving Big Cottonwood Canyon. Peak period traffic congestion and lack of exclusive bus lanes restrict mobility and hamper the frequency and reliability of bus service. Limited parking to access ski buses near the base of the canyon. Buses are already full by the time they reach to the mouth of the canyon, so people can't even take the bus if they're parking there. And then, of course, safety. This slide and bullet points kind of paint a picture of what the recommendations are going to be. So there are a range of options that can be implemented independently or combined. There's not one single overarching solution. There's a focus on winter peak periods, but year-round considerations are included. And then the full list of recommendations, descriptions, and implementation considerations are in the map document, which is on the CWC website. There's a half a dozen types of recommended solutions, categories and groups that we've identified and we've heard about. Transit service, travel demand management, parking management, mobility hubs and bus stops, roadway improvements, and administrative policies. So I'll quickly go over, under each of these, there's several recommended solutions that we could pursue, but these are the 6 high overarching themes of recommendations in the BCC map. We'll first start with transit service here. You can see we've got the options or the recommendations. We've got the key problems addressed here and a potential timeline of when we could implement this. So really, the first thing we're looking at is increasing the 972. And this is a near-term transit improvement. The next one is implement select trips on Route 953. So reinstate select trips, meaning, different times of day to Snowbird and Alta. These are identified in the UTA 5-year service plan. And then a supplementary reservation-based shuttle system. So really what the county and Visit Salt Lake kicked off, but maybe bring that up to a bigger scale in the near term. So we, of course, want to get to at least where we were on bus service last year as soon as possible, and then improve on that, and then have that reservation shuttle system as well. We're going to start shifting from near to mid and then to long term here. You can see again our key problems addressed, supporting this mode shift of increased transit, decreased peak period vehicles, single occupancy vehicles, and decrease in canyon parking demand. We see immediate opportunity with some state appropriated funding that came through this past session that can be implemented in the next year or two. Moving along, we've got this Big Cottonwood Canyon seasonal enhanced bus to 2 resorts, seasonal 5-minute frequency enhanced bus serving Solitude and Brighton. Immediate next steps can move forward in the near term with actual implementation spanning into midterm timeframe. This next one is an exclusive transit lane up from Solitude Ski Resort through the Brighton Loop. This is really nice. This gives buses the priority and the reliability getting up there and through the bottleneck through the Brighton Loop. And it will decrease transit travel times and increase that reliability. That next midterm is that year-round Big Cottonwood Canyon bus service. So serving Solitude, Brighton, and potentially major trailhead or locations in the long term. So this is, addressing that year-round transit needs. The transit service. So we're looking now more at this regional connectivity on how people are going to be able to access transit closer to their homes, and then closer to or be able to get up to Big Cottonwood Canyon. So you're looking at the Cottonwood Midvale core routes. Sorry, I'm giving a presentation. My son wants to say hi real quick. And then the 6200 South core routes as well. So the key problem being addressed here is increased transit, decreased peak period vehicles, and being able to give people an option, a transit option closer to their home than having to drive to the mouth of the canyon. We are moving right along to mobility hubs and bus stops. Now, we've gone beyond just the transit service, but actually the mobility hubs and bus stops. And these play a key part in delivering good transit. One thing that we looked at was actually restriping the mouth of the canyon. And this seems we could do this pretty quickly by just restriping, going from 80 stalls to 150 stalls. Mouth of the canyon, park and ride improvements, shelters, internal circulation, and accommodate transit service prior to the completion of a gravel pit hub. That's a mouthful to say. The next two are really important pieces to this puzzle. Is this Brighton Resort Mobility Hub up at the ski resort that can accommodate transit, all forms from shuttle buses to big buses, but being able to have a dedicated space that's safe for the users and allows for the buses to get in and out of traffic and have a dedicated space. And the same can be said for Solitude as well. And again, you can see more of these details in the report as well. We talked about the gravel pit just recently. It was interesting to see what some of the residents of Cottonwood Heights are saying about the gravel pit mobility hub. But that is certainly a key piece of mobility for Big Cottonwood Canyon and Little Cottonwood Canyon. And then the long-term mobility hubs, bus stops, are trailhead bus stops. So these are bus stops at some of the big trailheads, not the ski resorts. And we have to be working in tandem with the Forest Service on this front, as they're the land managers. And so we'll be working with them. And then these regional transit connection centers, strategically located transit centers within the valley, providing park and ride options, and connecting regional or valley specific high frequency bus and rail transit to Big Cottonwood Canyon. So
Blake, pardon me. Oh, Blake.
Yeah, of
Hi,
course,
this is
Ellen. Yeah, please.
Burrell.
Go ahead.
Hi.
Yep.
Oh, if you don't mind, I just, this is so fantastic, and I'm just eating it up. I'm wondering, as I look at this and the improvements for transit riders, I'm not seeing what I believe UDOT wrapped their arms around within the Little Cottonwood Canyon EIS in some of its more final iterations. And that is having facilities built right at each of the, of course, in the case of Little Cottonwood Canyon, that would be Snowbird and Alta. But is the CWC also advocating for transit facility within the Solitude and Brighton parking lots? Because we know so many people drive because they want to eat their lunch, so they come back to where they park their vehicle. That, there's really, not adequate facilities, in any of our 4 major ski resorts of Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon for transit riders. Is that something that CWC is including or advocating for?
So Councilmember Burrell, he literally so he highlighted I think what is exactly what you're talking about, but let's make sure this is what you are talking about. You can mention it again, Blake.
Yeah, absolutely, Ellen, Councilmember Burrell, excuse me. This is a key piece of the BCC map. And Mayor Knopp is adamant about how important these pieces are of the transit puzzle for Big Cottonwood Canyon and the region. So those Brighton Resort Mobility Hubs, Solitude Resort Mobility Hubs were definitely on our radar and included in the recommendations.
Oh, that's super. I'm so glad to see that.
I'm going to move quickly to roadway improvements because I want to try and keep some time for questions. These, and there's outside of these, the transit service has a direct impact on Cottonwood Heights. Those mobility hubs up at Solitude and Brighton, secondarily have an impact because, those are needed for really good transit. But some of these roadway improvements are really, ground zero for Cottonwood Heights. And these roadway improvements actually came from UDOT's Big Cottonwood Canyon corridor study. And we're trying to implement and really recommend the ones that hit the vision and goals of the Big Cottonwood Canyon Mobility Action Plan. And that has a lot to do with that mode shift of getting more people onto transit, reducing that congestion. So you can see some of the roadway improvements that we support and recommend from the Big Cottonwood Canyon corridor study. Fort Union dual left turn lane, Fort Union merge lane, and a Guardsman Pass road intersection. That's a little bit further up the canyon, but again, way more detail, a lot more detail on the report, that you can access online. Travel demand management, recommending dynamic tolling, congestion-based pricing, congestion-based tolling during peak period. We feel this is a near to midterm implementation, and we're going to have some more details on incentivized bus fare structure and transit pass options for riders, which includes year-round options as well. The last 2, parking management, definitely recommending a reservation system, ongoing and or new parking reservation systems at Brighton and Solitude resorts. and potentially 4 trailheads. And then once these transit and mobility hubs and reservations, we can start talking about reducing and eliminating roadside parking. That is a key piece of reducing congestion, improving safety, and allowing for better transit.
And Blake, if I'm not wrong, Solitude just committed to a new reservation system for next year, right?
I hadn't heard if there's a new program from Amber yet, so that's news to me, and that's great.
Maybe I'm out ahead of where I should be. So, but
Well,
I think I saw that.
Something.
Yeah.
But I was.
You know, I've heard from Mike Mon up at Alta how great the parking reservation system has worked, and that's proactive management that we need to minimize the number of cars that are going out there. But you know, a lot of those folks are shifting to the roadside parking, and then it really becomes a safety concern. So all of these, we're juggling all these. I call it the jigsaw puzzle because that's what it is. All these pieces are interrelated. So that's great to hear that the reservation system, that Solitude, they were one of the first ones to start charging. So it's good to see that they're taking that next step. And I'll follow up with Amber on that one too.
Great.
And then finally, I really like this one. It's a little bit outside thinking historically, I think, and this is an administrative policy piece, is a new canyon specific transit agency. So the creation of a new transit agency specific to address the transportation challenges in the canyons. So that one's a little bit more longer term, and a little bit different thinking than what we've done in the past. How might these options translate into next steps? We've highlighted what we can do immediately. We highlighted what we could do near term, midterm, and long term. These are kind of the details. These are the details that we'll be scrubbing a little bit more over the next few weeks to get a better sense of what's more near term than what we think and what can we do. And so our next steps, this is my final slide. Right now, the draft BCC map is open. It's on our website. It's open for public comment. Those comments will be reviewed and analyzed and considered. They will be included in the final BCC map. The final BCC map will be presented to the Transportation Committee on April 25th, and then a final board presentation to the CWC board at May 1st. And then we could certainly follow up with Cottonwood Heights City Council following that as well. And I also want to thank Mayor Wickers, Cottonwood Heights City Council for their involvement and participation and in this process. We understand that Cottonwood Heights has always been an amazing partner with the CWC, and it's so great to do some work in Big Cottonwood Canyon that is really right there in your backyard. So thanks, and open to questions.
Any questions?
Well, I would just like to make the comment. I think that's fascinating that CWC is seeing a long-term potential for a canyon transit agency. We know that, we lost UTA service this last ski season based on the remuneration problems with the bus operators, both attracting them and retaining them. And the more we really get a finer point on the need structure so that we can anticipate, these kind of things, especially as they pertain to our canyon area. It's going to require some real, forward thinking and willingness to accept, trends as they change and meet the needs so that we don't fall into, what happened this last season where, the transit that we so depend on was actually reduced at a time when we needed it to increase. So I love the ideas that, I'm not surprised. I think the CWC has been innovative and trying to move the needle now for some time and has move the needle. So thank you, Blake, for the presentation today and all that you're doing in leadership with the CWC.
Thanks, council member.
I have two questions. I really like the direction it's going to, but I need some clarity. First, on the tolling, has it been discussed how the revenues from the tolling would be dispersed?
So there is some state statute on where that can go. It's pretty dedicated towards, well, first and foremost, the administration of the program. And then I believe that it goes towards any sort of roadway maintenance as well. There, and of course that is written, that could be changed, but I don't see that changing too much. And revenue from the tolling is not anticipated to be incredibly high either. So I think first and foremost, it's going to cover the administration of tolling.
Okay, and then second, you talked about the specific transit agency. Where would that fall within a bureaucratic governance stack? So how many levels are we talking about adding, or would that add to any of these processes for the CWC?
Are you asking like if there was a new central Wasatch Transit Agency, how would it operate?
Mm-hmm.
It would probably have to fall somewhere under UTA, Blake, right? Just specific.
No, not necessarily.
No.
It could be its own transit agency. There's two different tracks you can do here. There's a Transportation Management Association. So you could, they're called TMAs. They don't collect revenue. They don't collect tax revenue, but they're a group that pay dues, and then they go out and they do several things. They could really focus on businesses and encourage carpools. They could also collect revenue from somewhere or from membership dues to go and supplement any other transit service. So there's a TMA, a Transportation Management Association. Now, the other track is an actual transit district. It could be its own district. And what I'm envisioning, what I've seen, or you know, a way that it could work is it partners with UTA. UTA commits to a certain level of service. And then this new district where it could collect, you know, revenues from taxes within the district, go out and meet or go out and try and find a third-party provider to meet a specific need. So it's a little bit more flexible than UTA, but it would certainly partner and it would have a strong partnership with UTA.
Yeah. Good questions. Well, Blake, thank you. I think it's interesting. I'll just give a little background how this came about. We were in a meeting. I think it was the Transportation Committee, right? Like and we invited UDOT, and we said, what do we have to do to get out in front of the transportation issues in Big Cottonwood Canyon versus what UDOT has kind of came in and mandated in Little Cottonwood Canyon. And this is what they recommended. Hey, come up with a plan and engage a partner, which is why Cottonwood Heights was actually willing to participate financially. And that's what we've done. Blake's done an amazing job creating an RFP that we chose AECOM, and AECOM's come up with some real solutions. One of the things we didn't really talk about is funding, and that's one of the things we tasked AECOM with, was to find funding opportunities to accomplish some of the things that the solutions that they've come up with. So anyway, that was awesome, Blake. Thank you for coming and participating and always doing a great job like always. So
thanks for having me. It's always great to be at Cottonwood Heights, and good to see you all. Thanks for the opportunity, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Blake.
Thanks.
Okay, item 5 is our staff reports. We have 4. The first one is for 5A, the City Hall alcohol policy and room rental costs. Before we turn some time over to our culture manager and Etchell, and to some Butlerville Day representatives that we're excited to have with us, I'm going to have Tim Tingy, our city manager, address this real quick.
Yeah, so, and you can come up, just just to give you a little bit of background, and it was in the memo that was provided by Paula and Ann. We had a lot of conversations a few years ago, well, about 5 years ago, about our policies related to the rental of the rooms and the Cullimore Community Room. And one of the things that the council had talked about and wanted to move forward with is allowing for, under certain circumstances, the use of alcohol in the facility. And so a policy was developed. There was a lot of discussion on that. There were concerns that were brought up at that time, particularly by the police chief, Chief Russo, and the police department. And we had a lot of debate on that. And so what we want to do is come back and give a little report on where it's at and what some of the issues have been related to that. And then we also have some fee discussion issues as well that we want to get your input on as we move forward. And if you want to see changes in these, we would bring these policies back to you at another meeting, but I'll turn it over to Ann and Paula to go into the details.
And sorry, I misspoke, but the real co-chairs are here for the next item, not for this one,
Yeah,
so
for the next
thank
one,
you,
yeah.
yeah.
So on the policy, when we decided to add the the alcohol, the council came up with Shane's guidance to do, the renters have to have a $2 million drum shop liability, and the caterer has to have $1 million. The problem I've had since this came into effect is I cannot get a $2 million policy for the renter. So we have not had alcohol, it rented with alcohol. The caterers can come up with $1 million. Most of them are doing right now is a 2 million for most places. So a 2 million for a caterer is piece of cake. But my biggest problem is I cannot get a $2 million policy, even $1 million policy for a renter to have a glass of wine, a toast with their wedding or whatever is almost impossible.
And can we talk about why that is important?
And that's something that Shane can kind of go into, he knows the legality.
Governmental immunity.
Yeah,
There's a, the city is liable up to a certain amount. I think it's like 2.7 or 8 million. Now, and so we're trying to bridge that.
if someone
liability
were
gap.
to leave here and, and had too much to drink and cause something, an accident, death, something, yeah, okay.
So, in order to move forward with this, I mean, as it's written now, I cannot reserve it for anyone with alcohol. So my question would be for you is change the policy or not allow, go back to the old policy where we didn't allow the alcohol. That would be.
And our big issue, I mean, if you look at the changing the policy to not require that type of liability, there are issues that a big concern for us from a liability perspective. So that would not be our recommendation.
Yeah.
And so we wanted your input. I mean, it's not something that's been workable. We haven't even had
we can't.
one group.
I've reached
utilize
out
this
and did a
policy.
lot of research to try and meet this policy needs, and I cannot. I've spent hours. Back in 2021, I spent with the trust too, trying to find the right policy with Shane's input of pushing it out there. Found one company was like over $1,000 in order to get somebody covered under this.
Yeah.
Because of what the nature it is.
And I think it's important to state that we are not against, responsible drinking, but if the problem with this policy is that we can't get an insurance policy to cover our liability. So I think at this point, I would be in favor of probably removing the alcohol option in our Cullimore room. And to get your opinions before we go forward.
Yeah, I would be in favor of removing liability is too heavy for us.
Well, the only question I have would be if a given, wedding party was hiring a caterer, and the caterer has a liquor license and they have the proper level of insurance. I don't understand why the private party renting the room isn't having the alcohol served through the caterer.
You know how litigants are. They would come back to the city.
Yeah, they actually are
Versus-
going through the caterer. So the caterer has to have a $2 million or $1 million policy. In what is written here, the caterer has to have the $1 million policy. The renter has to have the 2. So it is now a caterer that I've been talking to has a $2 million policy right now,
But that's still
but it's only 2. I don't know if they
It's-
would even
it's
be
still that
considered going up to that
hundreds
3.
of $1,000s short of governmental immunity.
Yes, I don't know if they would consider even going up to that $3 million policy, but both the caterer, which is the bartender, has to be licensed, has to be vetted through us, and they have to have $1 million right now.
Just
The
to have
renter
it toast.
have the 3. Now, just to have it close. Now, if we change that, I don't know if that would be even something.
The reason,
There's 2 different
what
policies.
are cities doing? Like what is Sandy and some of the other cities doing related to alcohol service in their facilities? Or I'm just curious what our sister cities are doing in relation to this.
If I remember, Mayor Peterson said when he was associated with the county, they just were not doing it at all.
Yeah, there's
That I remember. Holiday does something.
some, yeah, they're
I
all a
don't
little
know
different.
about.
Yeah.
To me,
So-
the issue is not what other entities are doing, it's the city's potential liability. And every governmental entity is going to have that same 2 point whatever. It's between $2.5 and $3 million in liability if they get tagged for dram shop liability. So anyway, that's kind of why I have advised what I have advised. I think that if the caterer can come up with a $3 million policy, why then that's fine. Maybe it could be revised to say that, between the renter and the caterer, they have to have $3 million,
well, can I ask you a question? Because of what would stop a potential litigant from suing the caterer and the city? Even, and if they have the policy, we're still show liability if the policy is not in place for us, correct?
yeah, we have to be named as an insured under the policy and have that much coverage available to us.
Yes.
So, just for consideration too, I think our location is something to think about. We are across the street from a church, across the street from a high school. We're in the same building as the police department. I think we also need to think about how that reflects
Right.
when
Good
we're
point.
serving alcohol here and people may be leaving under the influence.
Right.
So.
Or temporary thing, the 600 feet or whatever, the distance doesn't usually apply, is that correct?
Yeah, it's been several years since I looked at it, but we were okay with the church proximity.
That's
The fact that it's a
it's a
special,
good point.
it's a special one-time thing.
It's not
but
like
that doesn't.
we were opening a bar.
Anyway,
But it's not like, I'll just throw this out there. The school has activities all the time. They use this parking lot. I rent this room out, they're using the parking lot. So you have someone come out that has had a few drinks, gets in the car next to an activity going on. Can that happen? Yes, absolutely. Those are other things to take into consideration doing this.
And if alcohol's, which is, totally acceptable for wedding parties, there's lots of venues where they could get that versus coming to the city, I think. So,
I was on the nay side of this originally. I don't know that I've really changed. I was gonna ask how many, not just inquiries, but probably serious inquiries have you
I
had on
mean,
this?
serious where they went out looking,
Actually
maybe
started to pursue it
5 or 6
in the 2 years?
in the, yeah.
Been
like-
close to 5 years, I
Okay.
believe.
Yeah,
Oh,
All right, all right, thank you.
yeah.
So-
Not a ton, because I think a lot of them will
It's-
look over the policy before, but I do get some going, I'm gonna go find it. They come back and going, oh, never mind, that's too, I can't do it, I can't find it, or
So,
Councilmember Braille, final comments before we move forward?
Well, yeah, I'd have, I haven't, it's not something that I've looked into, so I'm going to just, let the majority rule here. I'm not, I can understand both sides of the coin, but, and I have not been able to look into it further. So, if the majority wants to, change it so that the policy is no alcohol, then so be it. I think we could just state, you have to come up with this certain amount of liability, but, insurance, but
We do.
take it to a majority consensus. I will not, I have nothing further to say.
Well, this is to go out for review and then we'll come back with a final.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think if you don't mind, let's initially write it up to remove it, but there could be something that is brought up between now and then that may change the
Okay.
Great.
worthy of discussion.
If I could just jump in and say, so I sat through, this for a long time, and I think that ultimately the council that made the amendment that allowed alcohol under these conditions was trying to say the city doesn't want to tell people whether or not they can have alcohol at their activity, but by the same token, the city's residents shouldn't have to basically pick up the tab for if a liability event occurs that goes clear up, to the governmental immunity limit and past. They shouldn't have to, the city's residents shouldn't have to pick up that liability so that people can have a party the way they want to have it. So that's why it came through the way that it did. And I'm sorry that Ann has had such a lot of brain damage trying to find the insurance, but that's the thinking on why it was done that way.
Okay, the second one is policy under the fee schedule. So, right now it states that, a resident, 501c3, nonprofit, or business within the city limits, can fall under the $50 for the room rental. The concern that I have, and I'm starting to see it build, is because that comma is there with the 501c3, anyone with a 501c can rent the facility for $50. Anyone. Now, I could have someone from out of state with a 501c, they come in and rent this for $50. It doesn't matter. 501c3s are very easy and they come a lot. This is starting to ramp up. I'm getting more inquiries because this is one heck of a good price.
Yeah.
For anyone. My recommendation is just taking the comma out. A 501c3 needs to be a place within the city, so it would get the resident rates. The 501c, if it's outside the city limits, it would just go to the $100 an hour. That's still a really good price.
Yeah. I agree with that, but my one question would be, why do we charge residents a fee to rent a public facility?
Because in order to help cover the cost, in order to have a room monitor
Yeah,
here,
we have a person
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I have a person here. And so a portion of about, I think we averaged $30. Sorry, looking at the person that helped me. We averaged about $30 for that person to be here an hour. And then the 20 just kind of help offset some of the expense that goes into replacing things and stuff like that. Also, there is my expense of putting all this together and renting the room and making sure. And you wouldn't believe how many hours I spend in there with the rental party, especially when it's a wedding.
I believe you.
And I'm not an event coordinator for a wedding. But it turns into that way. And I give them what advice I can, but it goes into that. And it's very, very minimal compared to any other place you're going to get. It's very.
And it was part of, when we did our fee analysis with all of our fees, we evaluated our costs related to that. And that's what.
Yeah, there was a pretty heavy duty study done to show.
So there's one more.
Yeah.
We've got the deposit that everyone pays as well. Do you deduct anything from damages and everything you may find after?
And that's on the next one, yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
for the deposit is on the next one, yes.
Yes, not a deposit, but I just
So-
wondered how,
Yes, yes, and it doesn't happen a lot,
Yeah,
but there's been times that I've had to go back through and readdress, and take some from that deposit to fix things.
and my point on that would be, we might want to include something in there that talks about the levels of reimbursement for the types of damage. Just so people can't question and argue with you about stuff to make it easier.
I
So,
may,
so
I can add something
This,
or,
because it's gonna cost you this much if we find a rip in the carpet. It's gonna cost you
right,
this much for a stain. Just so
And-
you can alleviate.
yeah, it's only happened a handful of times at this point. But I think I could probably come up with some,
Put in some cost of the repair.
Yeah.
I think it has the costs.
Yeah,
in it.
I think that's right. We'll confirm that. It would be kind of hard to come up with a standard price for, you know, a stain or a rip or something, because they could be of different magnitude.
I just don't want them arguing.
Yeah.
No,
You've been successful.
Yeah, I have been very successful. I had a one person burn a hole in a chair and she wasn't even the renter, telling me, don't tell the renter. And I had to tell the renter, and the renter's, well, like, don't tell her, I'm paying for it. And they both tried to pay me for the rent, the chair. I mean, the residents up here are very, very understanding and nice when I go through it and we have a discussion. I've never had any problems, but that's not saying I couldn't. So I will relook at that to make sure.
Well, before we move on to deposits, I do have a comment related to rentals. I completely understand if, our community room is being rented out for a wedding or some function like that. But I think that when residents want to use a meeting room to come together to discuss civic matters, that while they would need to put up a deposit, it should be, in my opinion, fully refunded if the room is left, whether that's with chairs stacked again. But in essence, if there's been no damage to the room, I realize we have manpower, that we have to have, people overseeing. But again, I've had comments from constituents who have said, look, I'm a taxpayer. I help pay for that building. I want to come together to talk about certain civic matters. We want to use the room for a couple of hours. We'll see that it's just as we found it when we leave. For me, that falls in a very different category than a wedding or something where there could be an hourly rental fee. So that's my input.
Yeah, deposits are fully refundable, right?
If there's no damage to the room, it doesn't matter what the event is, the deposit.
But the rental fee still.
Well, no, that's
The rental fee
that's
still
what I'm
applies
saying
because
is
they
that there's
still have to have-
no rental, there's no hourly rental fee when citizens want to come together. I'm talking about Cottonwood Heights residents want to utilize our meeting rooms. That's what I'm saying, that there should be no rental fee. I think it's fair to ask for a rental deposit, which of course is fully refundable. But also there should not be a rental fee when the purpose of the use is to, come together for a civic effort, whether it's frankly, yeah.
Yeah, we
So you're saying that we should incur a loss for something like that? Because
I think we
incur
absorb it
costs.
because it's a service to our citizens. I mean, it would be one thing if we were just overrun with requests, but I think that it would be a show of good faith that we are encouraging civic organizations to come together. It could be a Boy Scout or Girl Scout group or what I don't know. I know we let the youth city council come in and do functions. I think any way we can to encourage that. Well, look, anyways, that's, I don't know if you need clarification, but I think that should be, I think there should be a real, like when I read the verbiage that non-residents and residents be both paying the same kind of fee structure, I vehemently disagree with that. And again, I think that when it's our own residents, they should be able to use those meeting spaces if they can leave them as they found them.
Mayor, what I would suggest is with the policies, we'll come back with the policies for you to look at. But if we want to talk about the fee elements, I mean, that's obviously a budgetary process and that can be brought up through our budget process if we want to look at changing that when we discuss our budget. So.
Yep, no, I think it's a fair point, Councilmember Burrell, and
on the civic items, like the historic committee or arts council or the youth council.
those are covered in the city because it's city use.
Yeah.
We've also had many times where if it's civic-y enough that you want to have a town hall meeting, those come again without a charge because it's city related. I think we'd have trouble defining. I'd hate to go through and define what does and does not constitute civic.
And
I also
some
don't have
civic
a-
groups might just represent one side of issue and not necessarily represent an interest for the whole city. Like, for example, when Mr. Whitehead had these meetings on the Hillside Plaza, he was only presenting issues related to the purchase.
He was bringing his neighbors together. I thought it was a really
But he
noble
didn't
thing, and I
represent the
was,
whole- This whole city's views, he represented these groups' views.
and he is a taxpayer, and I disagree.
If we were gonna
Yeah, appreciate the comment.
full cost renting. It would be significantly more.
So the last one, do you want me to still talk about the last one, or you want to bring it up?
I
later?
think
Yeah.
I think we got some direction on the last one with the 250, just having that be the deposit.
Just a flat fee, because the way it's stated, is kind of
Yeah.
confusing, and just do it. Things have gone up. I can't pay for anything for $50
Yeah.
250 would just be flat.
Yep, and it's
So-
refundable if it's.
So if a resident only uses it for 2 hours, they'll get $150 back.
No, a
And then-
resident would get, no, they have to pay the rental fee, so they have to pay the $100.
Right.
Then they pay the deposit of 250, and they'll get the 250 back. They have to pay the whole thing.
So the
Deposit is for
350
security
total,
damage.
and they get the
Yeah.
other back.
Yes,
And
and it does happen. I mean, I'm pretty quick on getting their check back to them.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Good discussion. And then now we'll invite both of the Butlerville Day chair, co-chairs up as well. And that is to make sure I pronounce this right.
Do you want to slide?
Okay, let me try it.
You do. I'll tell you my name.
Kimball.
I'm Aubrey Kimball.
Aubrey, dang it.
Yeah, I'm a Utah name. My mama created. So there's only one of me,
And then Ashley
McClelland.
McClelland. Perfect.
And I've heard she can come up here or not. That's up to her, but at least she's part of it and can be accurate.
Perfect.
You can come up if you'd like. Conversation.
Lots of
right over
space
here.
today.
Lots of space.
And so did you want to start with this as well, Tim?
Yeah, the only thing I will say is a couple of months ago, we had a conversation about some proposed changes of the Butlerville Days Committee. Wanted us to look at, we've talked about that. We said that we would bring it back, and appreciate both of you being here to kind of give context in addition to what Ann has presented, and turn it over to them if that works.
Great.
So, we met with the Butlerville Day Committee, and the committee is the one that ultimately came up with asking for these changes to the parade guidelines. Most of the stuff on here is just a tiny bit of changes into the wording. The two things that is on line 4 and 5 that we wanted to kind of go into a little more detail, and we can kind of go through some of the other stuff. Is that for me, last year we decided to talk about safety for the parade. And we made quite a few changes on what they can do and what they can't do, and throwing candy and little things like that. So being in the parade last year, I really monitored the safety, and the biggest problem I was having is the candidates that were walking. They were walking next to us, and where they weren't supposed to be walking next to us, due to the sidewalks being overran by spectators, which is a good thing, because that means it's a great parade. And I brought that because at the very end, they walked in front of us. I had to stop the flow and everything, because we would have hit them. That got worried, and then maybe nervous, and I brought it to the committee for them to discuss. Aubrey, as the parade chair, sees things a little different than I do.
The same and different, right? I get my view.
Yeah, you get your back in the back.
I get my view. So I think of the parade is for the community, it's for the kids, right? So I want to that's my angle that I look at first. And then I look at with the applicants, what's fair, or what can we do across the board and be included. We can't prevent somebody from walking on the sidewalks, but we don't have sidewalks available. So why not fold them in and we do that as a safety piece? And then also I can stagger them in the parade instead of them choosing where they decide to walk on the sidewalk next to the parade. So my preference, and I don't think it's just mine, as the council, the committee, sorry, is that we go ahead and just put them in the parade.
As participants in the.
The candidates, yeah,
Candidates.
candidates that, we already allow seated officials in the parade. So we would be adding, to consider having candidates that are on the ballot for Cottonwood Heights, next, for the next election, yeah, to be in the parade. That way we can ensure where they are, that they follow the parade guidelines on safety, on passing candy out, not walking in front of other parade floats, and that they are spread out through the parade. So, for me, it's safety. For her, it's more organizational.
Organized and then safety
Yeah,
too,
safety,
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So that is one of, we also still prefer not to have political issues in the parade. That is still a very strong point that the committee made.
So you set those parameters as to what they're limited to, you know. It says in their flyers and things like that, that's out. But
We discourage flyers. We're not going to say absolutely zero flyers, but we
some
discourage.
semblance of
yeah.
identification.
They can say campaign running for this. Yeah, that's fine on their car, their float, or
T-shirt.
Sandwich sign, whatever.
their signs, yeah, whatever. But what we're discouraging flyers in this for everybody due to just the debris that it leaves on the walkway.
Not just some of them.
It's not just political. We discourage
Once
flyers.
you get to the
We're asking
sidelines,
to
you're in a
discourage
free
them.
speech zone,
Yeah.
so
So
we've got to be careful.
I was gonna say, what about the folks like the issue that we had last year that are running for a countywide position? That's
They
running.
could be-
well,
they
could
be in it.
As long as they're on your ballot, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because somebody in Cottonwood Heights could vote for him,
Mhm.
then they could be part of it. They
They
want
gotta
to.
be in their place.
But yes, and then I would say
But they
you're
would
number
be in it.
23, and that's where we ask them.
So here's a potential problem with that.
Mhm.
And if we do a general election, there's no problem. If we do ranked choice voting, they don't even file until August.
So that becomes an issue, yeah. I would assume you'd have to be filed.
When do you file?
Depends on which.
So if
form of voting you
ranked
do.
choice voting isn't until August, if
Oh.
it's a general election, primary system general election, they will have filed by June. I think it's June. the first-
Yeah.
So you don't file until August on rate.
Right, that's a
So
decision
that
still
would be
to
a
be made,
potential.
but it impacts it.
Yeah.
Mine, I actually thought about that, but the question then becomes if we get down to Cottonwood Heights candidates is to this group sitting at this table. Okay, because as sitting there, we're on the city float as the mayor or council or whoever, and we're going along with the city. I don't think it's appropriate there to be campaigning,
Right.
right? So then do we forego that and put back some, I mean, and that's kind of organizationally, but that's where it kind of gets to be a little bit of where we have a little bit of a dual thing. I think we have a responsibility not only to be seen by that's why we've always said, just a sitting candidate, just your name, so people know who you are. But we have had it was basically, I thought it was kind of a campaign entry last year, and we also had a walker that didn't stay on the sidewalks.
Yeah, even though we've been strict about campaigning, we are still having kind of seated officials just go ahead and do it anyway.
Yeah.
And so
And my observation on your points there, I've
you
seen.
got a good solution.
Well, I don't have a good solution, but my observation is, there have been times that members of a council or a mayor ride with the council, and then as soon as they're done, get a ride back and get with their group and come later on. I've seen that happen many times. And then I've also seen them just not necessarily be part of the council, but just be part of the campaign in a separate place. I think it's important though.
Put a printed cut out of themselves.
I haven't seen that, but I think it's important to be a part of the council, of course. I'm not
I mean,
advocating.
and that's from this perspective, because I think it applies to this group of the elected officials of Cottonwood Heights, because it's a Cottonwood Heights event. And so that's where,
So as a resident, I do like to see the council on a float. I want to see who's representing us or speaking up for us. I do like that. And I would think it'd be wonderful if you still wanted to have a section that you applied for and put in the parade. And then if you had a preference on being in it and you wanted me to put you towards the end, so you had enough time to get up there, I could. Just playfulness is all.
So what about other elected officials that represent Cottonwood Heights?
They
For
can-
example,
they can
there's,
be a
there's,
participant.
because here the language just says Cottonwood Heights. Representatives of Cottonwood Heights.
So if they're
So-
if they're an elected official, state or countywide that covers Cottonwood Heights, they would be eligible to be.
That's
right?
what I think that language should be in here.
More specific.
Yeah, more specific.
Okay.
We can look at that language.
yeah, I guess I just kind of see a difference with it being a city event, with it being this city's council. I don't really see it being an issue with our legislators, county representatives. Federal, they usually don't bother, but that's where,
They wanted to, I wouldn't.
well, and they have, some have, others haven't. Under the old one, as if it was a sitting official. So anyway, that's where but I expressed that amongst the committee as well, so.
Yeah, I'm receiving calls.
May
ahead.
I just make sure I understand? So we're saying that anybody who has registered to run at the city, county, state, or I suppose federal level, whether they're a candidate or an incumbent, they could have what you're calling a sitting presence. I guess that means sitting in a car, or they're not allowed to walk, but they're allowed to sit on. Is that what you're saying for all those? I'm trying to understand how far encompassing we're talking about.
They would have an entry just like
Yeah,
anyone else.
yeah.
It could be a float, it could be a bus,
They could walk.
they could walk. I mean, last year, Galen and Kathleen, it was a walking entry. That wouldn't be determinative, but I guess if you were going to do that, would you want to keep it strictly to that? Boy, see, now I'm getting into campaigns, because sometimes campaigns can be it may be hard to differentiate campaigning versus and putting out your position, as opposed to, what's the other one you said? We don't want political entries.
Political issues.
Well, nothing is more political than a candidate. I mean, this is where I'm getting confused, because I've been following this, rather closely in recent years. And I understand you want to go for safety, but I think the mayor brings up a good point. If we go to ranked choice voting, as memory serves me, there was just a 1 week period when candidates registered. Wasn't that, well, Paula, you're the expert. Was that the second week in August? Wasn't it from
It's
August
the same
10th?
for either type. There's 1 week, either way.
Yeah, so my
It's
point
gonna
is
be-
that technically, if we go to ranked choice voting, and tell me if I'm wrong, but technically no one will be
Right.
technically registered for the end of July.
That would be correct.
So I don't know how we would execute this this procedurally if no one is formally registered until after the parade.
You wouldn't, they wouldn't be filed, that would not apply this year.
They would be excluded, is what you're saying.
Right, because they're not filed.
So then what rules
Then-
would
then
we
you're gonna have
use?
the
That
same
only
people trying to
sitting
walk down the
sitting
side.
officers or?
Well, you may, I guess it depends.
I think there needs to be a
Could.
place for them, because what if there's an incumbent that's running, that's an unfair
Well,
advantage for those that are not registered, that are, they were.
Which has been the other side, which is why
Decide.
the previous policy was always, it's
Yeah.
just your name, your position, like the days of 40 or 7. This is George, he's the Grand Poobah or whatever he is, or this is so-and-so and this is.
So maybe the way we're leaning depends on what election choice we choose. If we choose primary general, we go forward with putting this language in, and if we choose ranked choice voting, we.
Yeah.
When do you think-
This
No, we have.
When
to
will
have
you make that
something like
decision?
this.
Because I've already got people
within the next.
I've got
Couple
people
It has,
signing up.
it has to be done by May 1st.
Okay,
No, before April 28th.
April 18th is when we are tentatively planning on having
So our next
a election discussion.
So they would have to.
Paula's
list
not gonna
language
let
in
us
there
wait
for
till the
those
first.
folks that they would have to register
But they
for the
can't,
pre. No,
because the registration period wouldn't start till after the parade.
exactly, but that's what I mean, how do you identify it, because now you're creating a disparate. Parade, and you're not, there's no equity there for those that are potentially gonna run and those that are incumbents running. There's a difference, now you're saying, oh, well, we're gonna discriminate against you. Because you aren't registered, even though this is something you're planning on doing.
Yeah.
And that's problematic.
Yeah. That,
So how would we address
So-
that?
Again, in the past, it's always just been, if you're sitting, you elected someone in Cottonwood Heights voted for you. You get your name and your position and you can wait, but there's not. The electioneering or the campaigning is not happening.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's how the days of 47 handles it. And so we've been very clear on that, although we've had a couple of incidents where.
I mean, we can go back to this. We can, I mean, this was just something that, you know,
Yeah.
I saw that for safety reasons. For fairness reasons, because we're having elected officials just go ahead and do it anyway.
I think we agree on the fairness.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Well,
The issue is.
How do we make it
Prove if
work
they're gonna run.
for-
If they,
yeah.
if it's not.
For
they're registered,
Cottonwood
that's the
Heights?
So they would have to be like a general entrant, but. I mean, they wouldn't be able to identify themselves as a candidate or anything else.
Couldn't they register as a potential candidate? I mean.
I was gonna
have
say, can it be a
candidates-
potential candidate?
Potential candidate, because we have people that apply for candidacy
So
during that week, but then they withdraw too.
these are all
So-
really good points, but you know what, let's. Are we okay time frame wise, if we make our decision, because this might not be an issue, if we go to a primary general. People will have registered to run, and so they're already in. If we choose ranked choice voting, let's revisit. Is that okay if we move on in that direction? Okay, so we need a couple of weeks till our next meeting, and if we go primary
That may not
general,
be an all-time curative because it could change.
the dates could change. yeah.
Well, no, I mean, there's. The decision in 2 weeks may not be final for 2 years out, or, you know. The legislature may make it always a choice. The legislature might say, this is what you're gonna do.
But I think you come back to the table. and-
Yeah, okay, but I'm just saying.
No,
it's-
For this year, let's do this. For this year, let's, I think we're in agreement to, accept your changes. If we go primary general, if we don't, we're gonna have to revisit it after that. Is that okay? Can we get to that point? Is that?
Yeah.
Fair? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay,
If I may make one last comment, Mayor.
sure.
For the sake of transparency, I think it would be nice for the committee to, keep a list of, I'm sure they have an internal list of who the parade entries are, and let that be available if people want to see who, what the entries
Yeah.
are for the parade. I know I asked for that last year. I don't think I was ever provided with that list, but I don't think it should be something that it takes a special privilege to be able to see that. Again, it's a transparency issue.
Oh, I know it changes
Yeah.
up
'cause
to the day out.
The
Or at
deadline
least
to
used to. I don't know.
register-
Oh, we'll have people show up like a night before and we'll throw them in. I mean,
Good people the day of.
day of come and we'll put them in.
And we'll have people.
I would have to refer
mean, I
back
don't
to
have an
Paula
issue.
on,
Putting that in under
On.
Butlerville days under the. On our website and adding to it, there's people, I don't know, so, yeah, that's.
yeah, I don't know
we're fine with
how,
that.
I mean, we can find
You
some.
could add entries as you get them, I guess.
We
Take that.
I don't have any problem giving people lists of who have registered if they inquire, so maybe we just do that.
Yeah, if they inquire, why not? Because it's not hidden, but anybody applies, but not everybody either shows up or not, like, there's sometimes where we've had to say, this does not work and here's why.
You're right.
And it should come through a grammar request.
Through grandma, yeah.
Through request.
Thank you.
Okay. Great, well, thank you all for that discussion. Okay, so we're gonna move on to item C under staff reports. And which is our transportation master plan. We discussed this specifically at our retreat in January. And our public works director, city engineer Matt Shipp was heavily involved, and so we've asked for some changes to be made to that. And so we know that you've made some updates, and then Adam's here as well. Hi, Adam.
Hi, how are you guys?
So why don't we turn the time over to you?
This extra time.
From what I understand, you're gonna review the changes that have been.
Yes, I am gonna go through the items that were updated, so we came. Let me first get this, how do I make this full screen?
Slideshow to the right of
You already.
slide.
And then.
Start slide from beginning.
Okay. So. Okay, so yeah, we presented to the council transportation master plan back in November. We received a comment from the council and we've adjusted the plan. And what we're gonna do is just go through the changes that we made for this final review. The first one was there was a question about the population data that was shown in the report and used in the model. I think in the original one, it showed something like 53,000. And so what we've done is we've updated the graph to better show the actual projected population according to Wasatch Front. So what you're seeing on the screen is what's in the revised report.
What changed?
So the easiest way to explain it is this is according to Wasatch Front, the estimated population of Cottonwood Heights in 2050. You can see the 2020 census is 32,700. And then the increase is mostly from the gravel pit, the proposed gravel pit development. Now, what we were showing before was something that is called the TAS model, which takes into account the population projections, but then it also adds the socioeconomic impact in the areas that are in the model. So basically what that translates to is employment, right? All the people that are coming in to work in those areas.
So Salt Lake would get a huge
Yeah.
bump there because they have a huge daytime population.
Yeah, daytime population is a good way of, so the 54,000 was the TAS model. So what we're showing is the 41,800, that's Wasatch Front's projected 2050 population. And then there's a section in there or a paragraph in there that explains, we use that, plus we use the socioeconomic data.
Okay.
So I think that number is more reflective of kind of what we kind of
I
thought
agree.
the gravel pit
Yeah,
is. So
that's talking about roughly 1,000. If it was just a gravel pit, 7,000 people is gonna be, I guess it's about 2,000 units.
yeah, it's
You're about 2.5.
It's
Average
primarily
unit.
just the gravel pit, because you can kind of see, and and I don't know the dates specifically. This might be off just a little bit, because we do have some of that development's happening sooner, and I don't know exactly when.
Well, there's a couple of hundred units
Yeah,
approved there. And then another tower that doesn't have an allotment.
yeah,
approved
and then
yet.
you have the rest of the
And then you
gravel
have the
pit.
other 100 acres that's.
Yeah.
So.
So,
that's
but this
probably
is,
not far off.
this is what we have with Wasatch Front, and, at the end of the day, it won't really impact the recommendations that we made in the master plan. So that's the population data. The second thing we were asked to look at was the Safe Streets for All grant. So we've added a section in there talking about the grant process. So the city's committed to developing a safety action plan, which is the first step to obtaining funding through this federal grant. The grant itself, its purpose is to provide roadway safety by significantly reducing or eliminating fatalities or serious injury. So that's their first step, is injury and fatalities. So the city has already made that first step with Wasatch Front and all the other, regional, local governments. They've obtained a grant to complete the safety action plan. And I believe the date for that is sometime next year when that would be completed.
And we're part of that.
Yeah, we are part of that,
May of 24 is the estimated completion.
of the safety action plan. And then the next step after that is the implementation grant. And what that is gonna be is any funds that are part of the any projects that are identified in the action plan would then be eligible for, consideration in an implementation grant. And some of you can see the colored at the bottom is, funds can be used for different projects, including infrastructure, behavioral activities, operations, which would be like crosswalks. So bike networks, pedestrian crossings, educational campaigns, roadway safety improvements, safe routes to school, intersection improvements. So a whole variety of options. But the important part is getting the safety action plan completed, and that's something that the city's moving towards with Wasatch Front.
Okay.
So there's a section in this master plan discussing all of that. The next part is.
Do we know if there's any cities that have opted out of that?
There was a couple in the northern area who tried to go on their own. But the FHWA stepped in and asked them to join the MPOs because they didn't want conflicting plans.
Okay.
So there were a couple that looked at it.
The northern Salt Lake County, because Provo did their own.
Yeah, Provo down there, I'm talking.
And they're not part of
They're
Wasatch
not
Front.
there, but Provo's part of their other MPO.
Okay.
Yeah. Wasatch Front is Salt Lake County and Weaver County, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Included Twill and Box Elder too.
it probably does. I don't know how far. I just know that once you go to Utah County, they are.
Yeah, they're different. Okay.
Of course.
Of course, yes. Now, so the third one is, there was some discussion about the existing level of service, specifically 2300 East.
Yeah.
I asked Horrocks engineer, they're the engineers that did the study, to look at that again. And so it was right on the cusp between a level of service C and a level of service D. So it was 12,100. So they looked at it, and we've concluded that the existing level of service of that road is relatively acceptable. So it's just an update on that part.
Okay.
And that's the only thing that changed on the level of service map.
They had it as an F, didn't they?
No, they had it as
As a D.
unacceptable. So I guess,
Here or here?
yeah, I'm sorry, I
North
missed,
North.
yes, that section
North
right
of
there.
Fort Union.
So that used to be red.
Okay.
So I guess I misspoke. It's D and E, and we moved it from E to D. And not C and D. So
Okay.
But it still appears in the phasing, in your phasing of projects.
so the
I-
project, and we can go to the next one, which is the recommendations. And so the projects themselves haven't changed. So for 2300 East, the recommendation for 2300 East is to reconfigure the roadway from 2 lanes to 3 lanes. There is a section, most of 2300 East is already 3 lanes, but there is the section in front of the post office that's 2 lanes.
Right.
So that would be the only lane on 2300 East that we're talking about, is the center,
Basically adding a center.
putting that
turn in.
center turn lane back in, but maintaining, because that center turn lane was taken away or removed to improve the bike lanes.
Yeah, to get the
Right.
bike lane in there.
And so there has been some issues with people trying to turn into the post office, and I don't think it's been that bad, but so
Where does that,
we never
where
brought
is
that
that on the traffic,
so
when you,
on this, so if you, on the screen are the proposed, the recommended roadway projects. 2300 East is project 1.1.
yeah, but I'm saying if there been a demonstrated number of accidents of people trying to turn into the post office? I just, when we know we have limited funds, to spend $3.8 million, what puts that at the top of the list to be, done in phase 1?
Yeah, I don't believe there has been a significant number of accidents.
Fortunately, there's not a lot of places in the city that,
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of those locations,
which
but
is
the.
I
nice.
mean, the
level-
primary challenge, the primary challenge I have with this transportation plan is that it is so focused on convenience for motorists, and yet, we're talking millions of dollars to make it just slightly more convenient for motorists to be more reliable, higher, level of LOS, when in fact there are projects that those millions of dollars are so needed for to make our city walkable and safe for all users. And so this is where, as I go down through table 1 projects by phasing, I struggle with the amount of money that we're spending, mostly related to LOS.
Yeah, and I think we can look at, the placement of 2300 East because we have adjusted its level of service. So it is potential that we could move that into a different phase if that's what the council directed. But I do want to say, so we updated the recommended projects to put more of an emphasis on pedestrian safety and bicycle safety. So what we did is for all the operation projects, we've included elements that include, walkability elements and pedestrian safety elements, and all those operation projects are projects that won't be adding additional lanes or capacity. It would focus on improving the roadway without adding new travel lanes. So for instance, like on Danish Road, you'd be looking at sidewalks, crossings, things that would make the road safer. 2300 East is also another one that has a lot of gaps in the existing sidewalk. So, and that's one of the things that we've added to these roadway projects.
This section cover right of way acquisition? Or is that somewhere else?
It does, no, it doesn't. The costs don't include the right of way acquisition. So we have recommended cross sections for these roadways. But there hasn't been a right of way study that's been completed.
Those would have to go in there and we'd have to.
We would need, as we go through the process of acquiring funding or allocating funding from the city, we would need to look at those kind of costs as well.
23rd East of Regional Road, considered a regional.
So 2300 East would be eligible for federal funding, yes.
Because it would if it's regional, it would also be eligible for the corridor preservation.
Which,
funds
well,
from
and yeah, those are,
county.
which are you,
Correct.
I'm just thinking, using this as an example, there's probably others that if the reason that it became a 2-lane instead of with the center lane like it used to be was to accommodate the bicycle lane, which was put in there, it would be nice to not then suddenly give back the bicycle lane, but to do, if we figure out a way to have that stay.
Keep the bicycle.
We need to.
Right, and be able to do it. And that would may very well include some corridor.
And I would just point out, so with the, proposed developments in that area, with the main focus should probably be the intersection of 2300 East and 40 Union. That needs both improvements with lanes, and it also needs bicycle improvements as well, because right now the width doesn't accommodate either right turn lanes, and it also doesn't accommodate through bike lanes as well. And so that's
Adam, so when we're looking at 1.2, that very intersection you just mentioned, is an auxiliary what you're calling auxiliary turn lanes? Is that synonymous with slip lanes?
So the auxiliary turn lane would be on 2300 East, there is no right turn lane for people trying to turn onto Fort Union going southbound. So right now everyone's trying to get onto Fort Union and they get stuck at that light.
Because there's not quite
there's not
enough queue.
There's only one lane, so they all back up, and then you have your left turn.
And I think one of the challenges I have with this master plan for transportation is, on the one hand, we say that we're all for SS4A, safe systems for all, but I don't think that we all see clearly or have come to a consensus on what it means to have safe mobility. For instance, in the books that I read, slip lanes encourage motorists to turn right without coming to a stop. Whenever you encourage that kind of behavior in a motorist,
I don't think
you
we
are
have any of
endangering,
those.
if I may finish, please, you are
Well,
endangering the pedestrians and those who are walking and rolling. Because motorists who do not come to a stop at any intersection where there are pedestrians and those who walk and roll, they are at a much higher level of danger than when motorists must come to a stop. These slip lanes, which I believe is what you're calling the auxiliary turn lanes, that endangers. So it goes counter to what we say that we're trying to create in a city center, which brings me to another key element within the master plan that I think is a basic problem, and that is we are deferring having true walkability in our city center area until phase 3, because we're talking about suddenly doing something from 1300 East to 3000 East on Fort Union, when in fact, if you really focus on the city center around the Hillside Plaza, westward, let's say to Whitmore Library, that 0.3, so a third of a mile, is the really intense need area for super safe walkability, if that's one of our goals. So to be changing the intersection at 2300 East and Fort Union to make it so motorists can more readily make right-hand turns, this is defeating the very walkability that we, on the one hand, say that we're striving for in our city center.
I'll just state clearly, I don't agree with that assessment. I don't see the slip lanes or what you're calling them as being what Adam described. While we absolutely need to focus on having safe streets and mobility, we also have to understand that making our pathways and our ways we get around so onerous on the most enormous part of our population and making it congested creates its own set of problems. And so when I say things like I'm not in the position of legislating people to force them out of their cars, that's the type of thing I mean. Yes, we should accommodate all users as best we can, but not at the expense of making it onerous for the people that.
So it's okay for
things
one
are.
pedestrian to be killed as long as it's not two pedestrians. I don't think we can measure this.
That's a disingenuous
safety.
comment. It's not even light.
We need to be thinking of safe mobility for all users. There's a reason why Cottonwood Heights is not walkable. It's because we have focused and continue to focus on high volumes
live in
of
the
motor
Western United
vehicles
States.
moving through places where there should be and could be children and people of all ages walking and moving about, but they are too fearful to do that within Cottonwood Heights.
So let's move on and let Adam finish now at this point. Thank you.
Yeah, so on 2300 East, so the recommendation wouldn't be, it would be a pocket lane.
Okay.
Not a slip lane. So these recommendations include, bike lanes, at the intersections, making sure that the bikes can safely get through the intersection. And all these extra projects, include, elements of walkability and pedestrian safety. And what would happen is when we go and do these projects, we would, at that point, make a more concrete recommendation that would include those elements. The other one that we put in was, we were asked to look at the transportation backbone. So we put together this map that shows the proposed projects for an active transportation backbone network. The gray projects or the gray lines are the existing facilities. So you see 2300 East there, and 2700 East, and then there's a small section on Fort Union Boulevard in front of the new condos. But what you're looking at here are a lot of.
Is this another word for neighborhood bypass routes?
So what the projects that are being identified here come from the Mid-Valley Active Transportation Plan. Most of these are shown as multi-use paths, which are the trails that are separated from the roadway, which are generally the safest form of alternative transportation. So you have Fort Union Boulevard, Highland Drive, Wasatch Boulevard, and Danish Road, all identified with multi-use paths. You can see the existing Big Cottonwood Canyon Trail is shown there. And this we felt was kind of demonstrating, proposed projects that would increase east-west and north-south connections through the city, to maybe encourage more alternative transportation for commuters, that want to bike to work. So we've added that to it. And again, these projects are matching what's shown in the Mid-Valley Active Transportation Plan.
I would think these would augment, I wouldn't call those, a lot of those neighborhood.
Yeah.
No, none of these,
Bypass would
none of,
definitely be better.
none of the, so Mayor, none of these are neighborhood bypass routes almost. These are all the collectors and
1700.
arterials.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, no, that
they're
makes
the
sense.
backbone of
Okay.
the program. We do have, I
and
guess,
they
East
would-
Jordan Canal Trail is also shown the extension of that. Which would, so that one would certainly help for neighborhoods.
Right.
That's project 234 and
Yeah,
154.
no, I was just looking to see where you connected on the.
Up to Greenfield and then up to Highland, yeah. That is it. And so those were the major changes to the transportation master plan.
So Mayor, if I will add, so these were from our discussion points in the retreat. We took information from the multiple times we've been here in front of the council and the retreat. And this is the latest. We'll bring this back again to another study session, but we would like your input. And as we bring it back to another study session, we eventually want to move to the point of consideration of this. We're not trying to push the council on doing it any faster than you want to, but we'll bring it back another time for discussion in the next couple of meetings.
This is the transportation master plan.
So
Correct.
these are changes to it, and I would be in support of the changes discussed tonight. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think they're good. They're good. But yeah, let's bring it back for another.
Well, just,
Go ahead, Councilmember Burrell.
well, I need to say that there, I'll just restate what I said moments ago. What you see in that plan that Adam Ginsberg just shared would be that we would perhaps by 2050 have the ability to ride bicycles on our arterials and collectors. This is not what we are understanding. Residents want walkability, and we can accomplish far superior walkability and safety if we focus on true neighborhood bypasses, which is not showing up in the maps. The mapping that I could see in the master transportation plan was not comprehensive. We need to have a citizen-led effort to map where people who walk and roll are trying to get to. Sure, some of them are trying to get to schools, parks, and open space, but there's grocery stores. There's, going into our commercial area on the west side. There's connecting regionally to our tracks lines or going up into Holiday or into Sandy. There's many things that people do that walk and roll, and what exists in our transportation plan is not from everything I've studied, and it's not taking us in the direction that residents are asking for in any timely fashion. And I urge the council to really, we need to really have a discussion about what it means to have walkability and safe systems for all. We can't just say the words. We need to really understand the concept and come together on that, Mayor. I disagree with what I see in this transportation plan. So I need to be on record in that fashion.
I think neighborhood bypass is something that we could look at. If you've got a map, that would be great. It may be an addendum or an addition, but I appreciate the work that's been done.
Yeah.
And so far, yes, it looks good. I think some of the other comments were disingenuous.
Doesn't mean that we're perfect yet, but we're trying to get there. But yeah.
This is a living document.
Yeah.
Lest we forget, this is a living document.
So great. Okay. So let's move on. Item B under staff reports is our Title 17 amendments. So Matt will have our Public Works Director, City Engineer Matt Shipp, tell us what that is, and this has to do with stormwater.
What has to do with us? Well,
Yeah.
first and foremost, this does not have to do with flooding that we are anticipating.
May I say, because I talked to Tim on that, because I asked him, are we looking at the what if all heck breaks loose? And I appreciate that he told me that your staff and people are looking at what if some of the basics that we usually do don't handle it? What are our next steps? So I'm glad that the emergency team and the police and the public works are looking at what do we happen if something does break? And I'd like at least the public to know that that's something
We're meeting on it weekly and developing the maps and the plans as we talk and speak, and Mayor's given us direction. I'm digressing slightly, but giving us direction
My
for
fault.
the worst case scenario, what if plan, and that's what we're putting together. So, okay.
Great, thanks.
So what this is the stormwater, it was this time last year, actually, that the city was audited by the state of Utah. It's not a surprise. Every city in the state will be audited at some point. We just happen to have our turn come up on a random draw. What that audit does is it goes through our stormwater program based upon the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, the NPDES. We like the acronym, so it's based on the NPDES. We went through and they told us we did pretty good. And they gave us like 40 deficiencies. And that's actually pretty good, 40. So that's what you call pretty good in this business. But so for the past year, staff, Adam, I say staff, I point to poor Adam, has been working diligently with our stormwater folks, trying to make up those deficiencies. We've made great strides. We've knocked the list down. We've knocked about 30 plus of them off the list.
Were those physical capital type deficiencies?
Physical capital deficiencies, inspection deficiencies, paperwork. They really love paperwork.
Process.
State loves process and paperwork. I can say it all day long, show them until I have the paper, it's a deficiency. Some are as minor as you're missing one page or one date. Some are as big as the one we're going to talk about right now.
When the FDA audits my wife's, their drug manufacturer, and all they get is a number of deficiencies and no big evil things, they're happy.
Yeah, so we felt pretty good about this, but one of the things, the big one that did hit us was we do not have a post-construction stormwater management ordinance. That is required by the permit, which is required by the state, which is a mandate from the federal government, which goes back to 1972 Clean Water Act. So we don't really have a choice in whether or not we do this. We did not have a post-construction ordinance. So what we did, working with Shane, is we figured out the best place to put it was in our Title 17, which is our flood control and groundwater source and storm drain. Seems obvious, right?
Right.
So we came up with 17.29. I'll get into that in just a second. There were some small things along the way that we also needed to fix in our ordinance. One of those things, simple enough, is the 80th percentile rainfall, meaning we had a developer or a redevelopment has to store the 80th percentile rainstorm, meaning we have a number of like 0.57 inches in the city of Cottonwood Heights, multiply that by the area, and they have to store that water on their site. So when a developer comes in and we make them put in a detention pond, they have to do it based on this. So post-construction, yeah, that water has to be on site and released at certain rates and infiltrated into the ground. That's what the 80th percentile means in a nutshell. They are required to do that by the ordinance, so we put it in here at this point. You can see it right there. All these that are in red are the changes. Moving on, we also have prohibited release items, but they've added a few exceptions. This was our original. These are things that are allowed to be released in the stormwater system, but they've also added a few others. These are in the red, the contaminated groundwater. Uncontaminated, sorry, yeah, contaminated. So what the heck, let's go chlorinated reservoir. No, the dechlorinated irrigation water and residual street water, wash. These things are allowed to go down the system without going through some of these things. Because obviously you can't have a detention pond for air conditioning condensation. You can't have so the state or the feds in some sense came up with some things you're allowed to do. So we appreciate them giving us that list. There's also a stormwater pollution prevention plan requirement. This is already in there. The old permit, the old NPDEF permit allowed disturbance up to 5 acres before you needed a permit. The new permit only allows you up to 1 acre of disturbance or part of a greater plan. So if you are less than an acre, but you're part of a big project that's under this, you're still required. If you're a single project and you're under an acre, you're not required to do a permit. If you're over an acre, you're required.
That'd be like a PUD.
Disturbance. Oh, that can be any project. It can be a single family home. It can be a development. It can be
PUD for something going on in one of the lots. I guess this is construction.
Yeah, it's continuous. If it's part of a larger, as long as it's continuing to develop, you have to do this. This is nothing changed. I mean, the changes here is the acreage size and the part of the bigger. The big one here is the 17.29. This is what we did not have was the post-construction stormwater management ordinance. We've added it to this. The state has a very big ordinance, model ordinance that we tried to work through. I sent it to Shane, and poor Shane just turned around and said, hey, just copy somebody else's and let's not try to do this. That's why he gets paid the big bucks. I appreciate him doing that. We cut and pasted from a few other ordinances around the state, and part of that requires the management plan post-construction. There is the maintenance of those BMPs or best management practices that are in here, the inspections for the right of entry. In other words, we have to have the right to enter private ground and inspect their stormwater. And we need the ability to do that. We did not have that as of yet. And once again, all of these things are coming from the top, and we're trying to put those in ordinance. And then one of the final things we didn't have was enforcement and penalties of these things. So we've added these, and that's everything you see in red here. And I will tell you, it does meet the federal requirements. I'm not a big fan of federal mandates, but when we have to do it, we don't have a choice. So it goes through and discusses all of these things. These are all brand new as put into the ordinance, and then you can see it as you go forward. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. We're trying to check off another thing on our list on our stormwater audit. Now, the state has been very good to us and working with us on time and working with us. And Adam has worked very well with them and very closely with them back and forth. They've given us extensions on a few things. We were supposed to have this done in December. They've given us that extension. They've done, like I said, they've been very good in working with us, and I appreciate the state in doing that.
Don't table it, please.
We are just looking to get council's approval or an adoption of the new ordinance. Once you do that, I can send this off to the state and we can take care of that final item on the
And
ordinance.
so this is our action item also for.
This is our action item.
Item tonight is
Our
voting.
action-
Is that right of entry only for future projects or is that? kind of like
Existing projects, if you have
Okay, so now-
we require, like the industrial down here, we have a couple of commercials, we have to be able to get in there and do that.
It's just says we
And
have the right-
inspect, it's
Yeah.
like getting into car washes, getting into restaurants, if we need to.
We're
all of those
required to
things.
inspect it.
And so we have to get in.
If
That's
someone
what this is
complains
all
about it, it says we'll go back to nineteen
And they have to
seventy-two.
sign an agreement that, you know.
Is there any objection to voting on this tonight?
I can see it's been causing Adam problem combing his hair because it's just like right there.
Yeah, it's like-
Oh, we'll get it out of there.
Okay.
Any questions on this? Happy to answer them. I know it's an ordinance, but,
You really don't want us that versed in.
oh, I'm
The
happy to
detail.
bring back the book on all this. and let you-
Adam needs to know.
No, that's good to know. That's good to know. Appreciate your work on that. Thank you, Shane and Matt and Adam. Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, item 6 is a review of calendars and upcoming events, starting February 15th. In the past through May 31st is the Cottonwood Heights Children's Choir rehearsals that are held weekly on Wednesdays. There's free ongoing registration if somebody hasn't registered already for school grades 3 through 6. And you can go to our arts website or contact Annette Show. April 8th, which is Saturday, is the city Easter egg hunt at Butler Park.
We should have asked Dan. There's usually an alternative plan in case there's still snow on the ground.
There is. There is an alternate.
I'm gonna go ahead and say that there's not gonna be snow on the ground.
My guess is there won't, but
Yeah,
there.
but we've got a plan in
Yeah,
case.
so yeah, the plan basically will be that, okay, we may have to have a larger just area rather than the breaking into different areas depending on the snow, but we've got things that we've been working towards.
So if you want to be there for the festivities,
10 a.m.
no,
I know.
1:45.
Yeah,
You jump at 10 and then someone makes a mistake.
there will be
it's
no
over at
candy.
10:03.
Yeah, you're exactly. Yeah, exactly. April 17th, from 6:30 to 7 is Aspen Winds Family Concert, the Barnyard Shenanigans, and that is here at City Hall.
So in the Colma room.
Is that the Cullimore Room? The Shenanigans, the Barnyard
I
Shenanigans.
think it is.
Cullimore Room. April 22nd, an important item from 9 to noon is the Cottonwood Heights Shakeout. Put the ribbons on your doors, participate. Sean will be happy, Paul will be happy. And then June 2nd from 9 to 1 is the free shredding event. Bring your personal items that you don't want to put in the recycle can and we'll shred them for you here. And then July 27th through the 29th is Butlerville Days, which we're excited
If we're
about.
not floated away.
If we're not floated away.
May I just add something
Yes.
on this? And this was not on the calendar. We have been advertising this, but we have with our sandbagging events to address sandbagging. We have a number of dates that we're working with specific areas. In fact, they include April 8th, 10th, 12th, 15th, 22nd, 29th for specific areas. And then
You're gonna make those kids fill a sandbag before they can collect their Easter eggs and go home?
no, but anyway, and then we also have the Public Works yard will be open at various times.
I
We've
think that's-
advertised all of this, but we want to make sure people know. that
I
we're
think that's been
working
very
on it.
popular, at least on social media. Have people been, or are they not showing up yet because we haven't started yet?
We started Saturday. And we did a 6-hour run and they filled about 1,500 bags
Awesome.
with
So that's worthwhile.
volunteers and people came in and pick them up. We were supposed to start yesterday, this whole week. Surprise. But we're gonna start again Thursday. I believe the announcement is we're gonna start back up Thursday again and then pick up in the following week, the days we've missed, plus 2 more Saturdays.
And what we're anticipating, just talking with Matt and Paul. With all of these events that we've had, we're looking at somewhere between 22 and 25,000 sandbags that will be filled in the month of April, and there could be more after that. So we're really working hard to get these things in place to hopefully help prevent some things as much as we can.
Right. we encourage our residents to continue to share that information on social media and help participate. Great, thank you. Okay, that's it for our calendar. We do not have an item to discuss in a closed meeting. So at this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn our.
Oh, I was just as a point, there is on the county's flood control site, you can go look and you can click on the camera, or not the cameras.
The graph.
Yeah, and it'll show you what the flows of the streams are, and they're usually within a few minutes. That will be, you can do Big Cottonwood Canyon, Little Cottonwood Creek. It'll be very interesting to see how that melt's going and what's coming for the next day.
Yeah, our
You can do the record snowpack.
And yeah,
we are monitoring that.
We like to look at it every.
Constantly.
We monitor it about once an hour.
well, they do it a lot more. I don't do it that often, but it is interesting to look at to see how things are going. So,
When it starts to melt. that's for sure.
and then I will say, I move that we adjourn.
Okay,
I'll second.
the motion to adjourn and a second, and before we say Councilmember Peterson joined us so that he could hear us do this. No, he's been on for a minute, but hasn't been able to speak. So, yeah, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're adjourned.
Oh, no, you're not.